Hey, everybody, welcome to your Velvet Ashes Legacy podcast, the first podcast of 2026. Hey, Sarah, how are you today?
Hey, Denise. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Velvet Ashes theme for the month of January is
It is family.
family. So, what were we thinking when we chose this theme, Sarah?
Well, I think family can be kind of heavy on our minds as we come out of the holidays and move into a new year, kind of depending on what our situation is. Did we get to be with family over the holidays? Were we especially missing them, being across an ocean or across a border or whatever, far away? And that can just be, it can feel complicated, whether it's family can just be complicated, right? Like those just navigating different dynamics and all the things.
I feel like in December, especially, the family feels heavy, whether you're not with them and you want to be, whether you are with them and you're feeling torn because it feels different than you hoped. I mean, our expectations are always off the charts, right?
Yes.
Or you are with friends that have become family, and that's a new experience, right? So then we turn the page into January, and I feel like family, you kind of feel the weight of that lift in some ways a little bit of like, okay, the heaviness of all of the thing of family is gone. And yet this is when we're starting our new rhythms, right? So our new rhythms of what do we want to do in this new year? What is important to our physical families that we have with us, the family of team and expats and nationals that we have created? What rhythms are important to our church family, to our, all of those things that family can be. So as maybe the heaviness of family, now we're being intentional about what do we want for our family rhythms for the new year to be.
Right. Yeah.
So as Sarah, sometimes like whether that's end of year or beginning of year, there are intentional rhythms that we put into place. Do you have any of those?
There's nothing magical that happens when we, have a new calendar. We talk about like you turn the page to a new.
I feel like it's magical. I don't know. Right?
I know.
There is nothing. It feels magical.
It's just like, okay, this is just another day. And yet in my heart, it does feel like, okay, there's kind of a reset. There's kind of a moment to sit down and like look at, are there things that I want to be more intentional about? Are there rhythms that I need to evaluate? And so I kind of love whether it's kind of that last week of December, moving into January, in a very like, with a lot of grace, nothing like, okay, I have to be rigid and all these things have to change. But
check the box.
Yes, it's such a good opportunity. I feel like it has been for me to reflect, to look back. Okay, what were the things that worked well in this last year? What was life-giving? What was draining? What were some of the highlights? What am I super grateful for? And just kind of walking through some reflection, but then taking that and looking ahead. Okay, what have I noticed about some of the patterns from this last year? What can what are some little steps that I could take or just little goals? And I can be the type of person to be like, all right, I'm going to learn this new skill. I'm going to, make all these big changes and do all these things, set all these grand goals. And so I am learning slowly to be a little bit more gentle with the goals that I set and just be like, all right, what's something small that I could just tweak just a little bit to create health or focus on something that just needs a little attention or just be more intentional.
Yeah. I think some people actually have it together enough to do that in December. I have never been one of those people. My husband is. He like tries to do this end of year examine. And I have friends in my Barnabas International life who are so intentional and protect these days in December to like actually reflect. I am more of a, this about me, Sarah, like fueled by procrastination person. And so I find myself more in January going, all right, what do we want to look at and do differently? And so I agree with you. I find like that I'm in that area, and I do love a good planner. And like the idea of opening this fresh, full of potential and possibilities type of thing for the new year. And so before I jump into like planning too much, I find so like my rhythms in the Lord and in the Bible and in the Word, like there have been a couple of years now where I've done I'm going to peel through the entire Bible, the chronological thing. Or this year I'm sitting in the New Testament because man, when you do the chronological Bible, you are so forever in the Old Testament that you just like want some Jesus so bad, right? So like I did a whole year of just the New Testament last because I was like, I felt like Old Testament was such a wilderness of Jesus, which he's there, like whispers of him, but and then we get to Advent in December where I was just like, oh, it's a structure. Like I like to go through an Advent book or two during Advent. And so then January is this also a new rhythm of like, what do I want to do with the Lord this year? Where do I want to sit? What do I want to be in? And so I'm still like trying to figure that out for this year. What does that look like for me? What about you? Do you have any like, this is what I do every year with the Lord, or are you looking at new things for this new year?
Yeah, I love doing a chronological or, even just like 3 chapters a day to read through the Bible in a year. I have found that I just crave that. Like, I just want to dig in and just be reading but there are different seasons, right? And sometimes different things resonate. And so, I think for me, 2026 is going to be a little bit more study based. And that's just, I have those resources available to me and taking a little break. I've been doing a read through the whole Bible in a year for the last couple of years. And so just wanting to kind of switch things up. As you were talking to Denise, I was thinking I heard on Annie F. Downs' podcast recently, she and her guest were talking about like taking off that pressure to have everything figured out, whether it is our goals or our Bible reading or whatever it is. Like, take all of January. It doesn't have to be by the first of the month, by the first of the year, you've got all this stuff set in place. And so I love that sort of like just really gentle approach to,
Yes.
Give yourself some grace.
Let's normalize making January the onboard to the rest of the year, right?
Exactly.
So that you can glean from everybody else who is not fueled by procrastination and has it all figured out and they're posting about it. You can use January as your onboard to what do we want 26 to be? But okay, Sarah, planners. Do you have yours for the new year?
I do. I love a physical planner. Like
I do too.
I admire the people that like just have, their whatever Google Calendar, whatever online version, so that they can be having stuff on their phone and looking at it. And I have gotten a little bit more into that, but I just love writing things down and being able to look at a week or a month and see what I have and writing it down. And
Yes. I know. Well, and like wherever you are in the world, your access is changed to what you have. You planned ahead to order a planner. Do you make your own planner? I've gotten into like making my own watercolor books and different things. And I was thinking like, could you make your own planner? But I did not. I ordered one. And so, yes. So tell me about what you like about yours. What did you choose yours for?
Yeah, last year, right before the start of this last year, I was in Hobby Lobby, which is, kind of like a craft store in the US. And they had these like, binder type planners that were pretty thick. And I loved that. Like, I love having enough space for each day to, write all my appointments and all my things and all the birthdays I want to remember and all of that type of thing. And so I went back for my 2026 planner. And I don't know, I was trying to look, it doesn't really have the brand super obvious on it. So I don't even know what the brand is.
Well, so describe what it looks like so that people can imagine with you.
The one I chose is like black with kind of a floral print on it. And I'm not always like a super big floral person, but I just really liked how striking it was. But yeah, it has space for like each week.
And it has
to be able to.
tabs. Oh, I can see
Yes.
tabs, so you can move
Mm-hmm.
through the months.
Yes.
Um, that's so great. There's something about like looking at your planner at the end of the year and being like, this is the things, these are the things I did, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like, oh man, I survived that really crazy week, where there was
Yes.
so many meetings per day, or, like whatever it was, like, oh yeah, a lot happened in that stretch or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, so my planner is kind of a mustard yellow book. So mine does not have, Sarah, yours has the coil. Mine is just like a
Yeah.
book binding.
Okay.
And I had to go through, mine didn't have tabs. So I put these little magnetic bookmarks on each
Oh,
month
fun.
so that
Okay.
I could easily divide it. So I'm kind of making it what I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
What I realized I like, so Sarah, you and I have meetings every month. And so like this has place on each week to like jot the notes for the week
Mm-hmm.
so that I can hopefully keep those straight as like, oh, when we were talking about this, what did we say?
That's good.
So I don't know. We'll see. We're giving it a shot. Here we go. Empty planner. Get ready to be
Yes.
filled for the year.
Yeah.
I don't know. So much fun. But so I don't know, you in the Velvet Ashes world, are you a paper planner person? Do you still enjoy looking at that and filling it out for the year? And we'd love to hear your comments about your
Yeah.
planner, what kind of people you are.
Well, I know some people like have designed something and they print it out, and maybe it's not for the whole year, but they print it out a week at a time or something. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. So it would be fun to hear
what's important to you in a planner when you're looking for it,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Another thing that's fun to hear from our community is about these polls that we sometimes do on Instagram. And so one of the latest ones we did is a very important topic that we decided to talk about, and that is your morning beverage. All over the world, Velvet Ashes community, what are you drinking in the morning? So one of these was funny because I was at a coffee shop, and where I am currently, it is very cold. We have experienced a really cold snap, like highs in the negatives. And I was at a coffee shop recently and I ordered a coffee, and the guy asked me if I wanted it hot or cold. And I looked at him, I was like, literally -degrees outside. Do you have people saying I would prefer that coffee iced to make it even more cold? And he looked at me as like, yes, that's the only way I drink my coffee. And so I am not one of those people. I would prefer a warm morning beverage. Sarah, what about you?
Yeah, I will drink it hot all year round.
All year round.
Yep.
Even in like hot.
Yes. Yeah. When I discovered, Southeast Asia has iced coffee with like sweet milk, like sweet and condensed milk. And it's typically like Vietnamese coffee you can get, even other places, but Cambodia has the same thing. And when I discovered that you could get it hot instead of iced, so you're getting hot coffee with sweet and condensed milk, I was like, okay, this is, no matter how hot it is,
this is it.
This is my go-to. And I'm just more of a hot coffee girl.
Oh, there's this in South Sudan. It was this foil packet, individual loose ginger tea that my friend Gloria, who would come over, would make it because she liked so much sugar in it. And I remember when like I was homeschooling the kids, she would make them each this hot cup of hot ginger tea with, I don't even want to know how much sugar, but it was so good. And it's just the best sweet hot drink ever. So yes, I totally get that. I don't know. I do add in a cold during the hot season, but in the Velvet Ashes community, 77% of you are coffee drinkers over other beverage drinkers. So
I was a little surprised by that.
I figured was too.
Tea would be a little higher, but
tea would make a better showing than it did. But no, coffee. Okay, so of the other types we asked, what do you prefer? And like, how do you drink your coffee in certain places? And many of them chose a fancy mug in a cozy place. So it was about the experience for our community. They're actually making it a whole moment, which I appreciate because you never know what your day is going to hold. So if you have control over your start in a beautiful place,
have a little moment.
Have a moment. evenly split on, are we black coffee drinkers? Do we just add cream? What about the sweet creamy drinks? We are pretty evenly split in our community. Yep. We're having coffee, but we're all over the place. And then French press. Most of us use a French press, which you brought a good point. When you don't have electricity, French press is your go-to, right?
Yeah. Or if it's not consistent, it's also easy to bring with you. You can just take it with you if you are traveling. And that was how I fixed coffee when I was on the field, was French press.
French press. So did we. French press, hand grinder. My kids would jokingly, my mom, when she came and stayed with us, was like, I had dreams of pencil sharpeners every morning because you were up grinding the coffee and I just thought it was a pencil sharpener. So yes, hand ground, French press. That was what we did. So fun. And I think when we traveled, we actually got into do you know the Via? I don't even know if Starbucks still does these, but they were the Via individual instant coffee, easy to slip in so that if you were somewhere that did not have coffee that was up to your morning ritual standards, then you could at least throw a Starbucks Via in. But there's also like Nescafe has so many different brands of instant coffee.
Right, and kinds. Yeah. We had Nescafe and I actually liked it.
Yes. I think if you get in your mind, like, okay, this isn't coffee from a coffee shop standard, but this is a nice warm morning beverage and like it holds a different place. You create a new box for Nescafe in your mind. Yes. This is my Nescafe box. And this is the type of coffee I'm going to have this morning. So yes. So much fun getting to feel connected to you all globally as you share your morning beverage choices and how you go about that. But another way we like to feel connected is through these stories that we get to be a part of in our community. And this month we sat with Joy, and what a great gift it was to sit with Joy. We were connected to Joy through a mutual friend in our community who sits with a lot of global workers. And he was like, you've got to talk to Joy. Joy has such a sweet, tender story. I even find I'm slowing down as I talk about her because she is very soft.
Yeah. And one of the just most peace-filled people that I think I have met, in just the way that she was sharing so tenderly about how the Lord has walked with her through some really hard things. And yet, man, you could just see, like, her name is so appropriate. You could see the joy and just the peace that she has.
Well, and for a lot of us in the world, we are experiencing a type of winter season. And for some of us, that winter season may feel really, really hot. We're entering into hot season, but they produce the same effect on you as like you slow down, you pull in. And I feel like that's the kind of season Joy talks about. She was a physician assistant on the field, and her life was very much about going and doing. And she was a triathlete, and she talks about what changed all of that and the season that she's in right now with the Lord and how she's learning new rhythms. And so I think this is a really timely episode, as for what season you're in the world, as we begin this new season of a new year, and asking the Lord questions of, who do you want me to be? Where do you want to show up with me? How do I want to engage with you in this new year? And so, so grateful for Joy, for her willingness to share her story with us. And I think you will be blessed to interact with this legacy story through Joy. We hope that you'll enjoy Joy as you sit with this story. Thanks for tuning in. And thanks for Barnabas International again for making all of this possible. Get ready for the story with Joy on the Velvet Ashes Legacy Podcast.
Every voice part of the symphony.
Joy, what a delight to sit across from you today. And what I love about this particular call is that you and I are going to get to know each other with our audience as they listened today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's going to be a delight to get to chat and know you while talking about life.
Right. We were joking before we got on that there is a gentleman in the member care world that his name is Barney. We have actually done a workshop with Barney, a webinar here at Velvet Ashes, but he is the connector of all connectors. He connected us. But we joke about the 12 degrees of Barney because it feels like if you have been a global worker, there is some connection to Barney in this world. So we're thankful for Barney for connecting us today.
Thanks, Barney.
Thanks, Barney. Joy, for those of you who haven't met you before, how would you describe the season of life that you are in right now?
Oh, goodness. Definitely transition. So I resigned a few weeks ago from a role I've had for about 5.5 years as head of member care over at Christian Health Service Corps, which I always say we only send medical missionaries, so we're especially dysfunctional in what we do. But just an absolute delight and love, but also an unexpected place that I landed. And so right now, really just in a place where I'm going, Lord, I feel that you have rest for me here. But also I feel that you are asking me to slow down and to create quiet space, an empty void, to hear your voice and to see what you will place in my hands next. And while that all might sound really spiritual and good, I'm not good at waiting. I like task and action. So it is a discipline as much as it is truly a gift.
Yeah, for sure. Joy, even that role into member care was a transition from a previous role. You actually didn't just care for medical workers. You used to be one of those medical workers. Would you talk a little bit about what life and ministry used to look like for you?
Yeah. So I'll go back just a little bit further. Before I went on the field, the last stateside clinical role I held, I was a clinic manager and a PA, physician assistant, now becoming physician associate, but a PA for a faith-based charity clinic. And so an administrative role, a clinical role, but really working with clients from all over the world who were in very poorly resourced areas or low socioeconomic. And so doing that and going short term on medical mission trips to many places in the world, you could see that would be an easier bridge into long-term service. So I went with Samaritan's Purse and then ended up signing up for my first long-term position with CHSC. And I ended up at Kapsawar, Kenya, a little rural, not as little anymore, but mission hospital, and loved it, loved my team, loved the beautiful climate there. I was a triathlete in my prior life, and I could go out for these runs with sunrise coming up over the mountains.
Oh my goodness.
And get back and take a cold shower and head to the hospital and start rounds.
For those who are listening that don't maybe understand what it's like to be in the medical field as a missionary, talk a little bit about, I know there's this phrase that has been termed called moral injury, and some of those different things that you hold in the space as a medical missionary, quote unquote, as I put my little air fingers up. But maybe invite us a little bit into what does that world look like?
It's complex. It requires grief, lament, holding paradox and unknown. I think we would all identify that in our work, but I would say there's some unique layers to that in the world of medical missions. So I can remember several situations where, I was treating a patient and medication ran out and the pharmacy did not have more and more had not been ordered, and thinking you would save the life of a patient. You had already headed down that path, only to find out all the work, time, resources, people that had poured into that were going to come to nothing, and you were going to watch that patient die. Interestingly enough, our hospital gained somewhat of a reputation during my time for hospice care. A lot of hospitals would send patients home to die, whereas we tended to allow them to stay on the ward. And so sitting with people who many times in the US would have been able to have life-saving treatment, a very different type of holding, of being with patients as they step heavenward, or as you begin to have dialogue about, who is Jesus to you? What does it mean to be looking at the end of life? Which it's a whole nother conversation, because how you talk about death in different cultures and if that's acceptable, that's its own podcast, I'm sure.
Oh, for sure.
I will plug, for those that are interested more in this, Dr. Jim Ritchie writes on moral injury and has handouts, PDF booklets online. Highly, highly recommend those.
Oh, I've met Jim. I've been at conferences where he's spoken on this, and it's just such a fascinating and deep way to understand our, colleagues in the missionary world who are, they're holding this whole different set of challenges that if you're not there as a medical worker, you may never experience quite in the same way as that. So I appreciate you inviting us a little bit into what does that look like to usher in conversations around the Lord in a medical field, especially as you're dealing with end-of-life decisions. And I imagine that community that then you sit with, you form really close attachments to as you have to process those things. What was that like being there as a team? Did you have the mental space to be able to be there for each other, or how did you care for yourself in those times?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's very different. It's individualized, right? So some people are highly relational and some people internalize their stress. And so I think that mixture is probably present on every team. With the organization that I have been serving with up until recently, we asked for people to create their own self-care plans. So looking at what are you doing physically, emotionally, spiritually? What did you do before you were on the field? What do you do now? What's available? And I think that's a really good practice. If I think back to my time, running was my physical self-care saving grace. I could go out, get that beautiful white noise in my head, lots of conscious and unconscious processing. I could rail at God with what seemed unjust and unfair or the moral injury, but also just the ability to get out, take deep breaths, and be grounded again in something outside concrete walls. I think on the spiritual side, when life doesn't feel very good, when you can't seem to experience embodied the goodness of God, grounding yourself in His truths and His promises, being able to hear other people who have right now active living stories of His goodness, and even those in history, whether from scripture or missionaries and what they have been through, just being reminded of that, or being able to go back and go, I have these monuments in my life where God was good, and I can look back at that and cling to it. And then I think on the relational side, I served as a single woman on the field. So that could be life on the field is lonely. Life on the field as a single can be very lonely. So intentionally forming relationships with the locals, with my team, and asking for a lot of grace in it, because those you work with and worship with and ... You have to scrape off the irritations or they build up and they will sink a relationship.
I actually really love that mental picture of scraping off the irritations with each other, because that mental picture it's not an easy thing. And sometimes that's painful, right? To scrape something off. It is necessary for healing, though, to happen as well. So the things that you have just mentioned, there was a time in your ministry where there was something that happened that kind of changed the ways that you took care of yourself. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I will. And I have a special name for myself in this. So COVID was what really changed my life in ministry. So I name Joy before COVID as BC Joy. So I'll refer to her that
BC,
way.
Before COVID, yes.
Yeah, before COVID Joy. So I've given you some context about BC Joy. She's serving, she's running. She generally wakes up each morning with the energy for all that she wants to do for the day. And she doesn't have short list of what she wants to get done. But in the same time, I had also started language school in the city. And so I was commuting back and forth between the hospital and language school. I'm also trying to get a place to live built at the hospital so I wouldn't be in guest temporary housing. And I came back one weekend from a run and could barely get over to the railing and was just blacking in and out. And I thought, something really strange is going on here. Went inside, drank some water, and the next day had fever and really serious muscle cramps, and thought pretty quickly this was during COVID. Thought, I think I have COVID, and that's what the test came back for. And typical of my story, thought, it's just COVID. In a few days, everything's going to be fine. I'll be right back to BC Joy status.
And Joy, is this in like 2020 or when is this?
Yeah, it's right at the start of 2021.
Okay. So you're in Kenya during this. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to paint a backdrop of that, like, hospitals are full, they're overflowing, people are outside under trees. In the city where I was, it was actually several $1,000s to be on a wait list, just the wait list to get a bed at what we would consider to be a hospital we would want to be treated at. But going from this place of I'm going to be fine, this is just a little bug, it'll be another little virus, I became very short of breath, and then found that actually I couldn't stand up for very long or shower part of my body or put a whole sandwich together without being so exhausted that I had to go and rest. And I had a pulse oximeter and I put it on my finger, and I found that actually my oxygen levels were dangerously low. And it was a miracle. Are you
living alone at this time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Total isolation. Yeah. I mean, there were people around me at the language school, but you couldn't have anyone near you, of course. But miracle at that time, it was really hard to get oxygen. People were running short, but some of my friends at the hospital managed to get me an oxygen concentrator. So with guidance from colleagues, I began running my own oxygen, my own steroids, my own blood thinners, my own antibiotics. And just feeling very afraid, alone, unable to see people other than looking out the window through bars and seeing them at a distance. And a few weeks of that, we began looking at medical evacuation and going, this doesn't seem very sustainable. And I think I need more access to care and in a place where others can truly care for me. And I think, as you would imagine, medical evacuation is never easy. Medevac in COVID was beyond challenging. So you had to have several negative tests. I actually ended up outside the US Embassy in Nairobi in an ambulance on oxygen in the heat for 8 hours trying to get a visa.
Oh my goodness.
For the anesthesiologist who could travel with me because his had lapsed. Lots of details in there in the hardship, but I did finally get evacuated back to the US. And there's not time for the whole story, but again, found myself going, oh, in just a few months, I'll be right back on the field. I'll be totally fine again. But unfortunately, after a few months, it became very clear that COVID had brought a lot of chronic changes to my body. That work overseas, I was no longer allowed to do that by my pulmonologist and my medical team. And that continued to form what I call a very stripping year. And it felt like, really, if you could have made a list of everything that I said I would hold as precious and part of my identity and confidence, it felt like God was taking that away. So this identity is this healthy young medical missionary. What I was given instead was ill, medically complex, and dependent on others. This love I had for travel, different cultures, able to eat all the foods. I went to unable to travel, stuck in the US and on a very medically restricted diet. The value I had of serving others, I had to have others serving me. I couldn't run, cycle, swim. I had to go through 3 rounds of rehabilitation programs to walk. Practicing full-time medicine, taking night and weekend call. I could barely get through church before I needed a nap.
Oh my
and
goodness.
I really felt like I had no team, that I was a failure, that I was utterly useless and worthless. And I told God, I don't think you're done with me yet, but if you are, you can take me home. I just sure don't understand the timing. I was so useful, and now I can't do much of anything.
So if we go back to the beginning of BC Joy, and you connect with God when you're running, you feel close to God when you're doing, you see him working through you when you're meeting the needs and holding the hands of clients. How did this season, and Joy, I can't even imagine. I think as you're describing this, we all have our different images of what we were doing in 2020. And we have, different relationships with people that we saw suffer, different stories that we heard of them, engaging through bars, in some way with those that we care about. And I can't imagine what you went through, even going through that so isolated and alone. And thank you for sharing that with us. But I'm just curious, how you began to relate with God and view yourself change in the midst of this. I'm not, and I may never be back to BC Joy, who can feel close to God when I'm running through the Kenyan, countryside. Did you have hard questions for him? Did you have hard asks of him? Did you have hard views of who am I during that time? And what did it look like to begin to formulate new ways of connecting with him?
Yeah, to all of that. And I'm sure anything else you could think of. Yes. I think that story will only continue the rest of my life. But the beginnings of it were questions and the places where you're unsettled and uncomfortable and letting that splat the wall. And there's a lot that God was doing in there. But I think one of the verses that became a life anchor for me in that time was Hosea 2:14, which says, "Therefore I'm going to allure her. I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her." I think another translation says, "Speak comfort to her." And I think, you can question why and wonder, and, all these lenses for the theology of suffering. Why does this happen? But for me, I wonder if God really needed a hollowed out, quiet place where very few people could walk with me, understand. And that was going to be a wilderness where he was going to speak comfort and tender love over me that I had never known, and go, hey, everything that you're clinging to, that your hands are so tightly grasped around, I'm going to gently come with my potter's hands and start to peel one finger back at a time. But I'm not going to leave your hands empty. It's going to feel like it, right? Like suffering often feels like, or stripping, that all we have is this empty ugliness. And no, he said, I'm going to take this away. And we're going to wrestle, kind of like Jacob in Genesis 32. And what came in that was joy. Your identity, your BC joy banner over yourself was joy doing for God. But I have so much more for you. And one of the ways I can do that is by getting you flat on your back where you can't do anything. And I'm going to show you how much I delight, enjoy being with God. And that's your new identity. That's your new name. That if you wake up in the morning and you can't do anything, that I delight in just you and who I've made you to be, that you're my daughter. And from that foundation, that wrestling, that new comfort, new tenderly spoken forming, that's where I think he could use that to create a catalyst and go, yeah, actually, I do have new work for you. And it's work you never could have imagined, and you thought you would have been drug off the field kicking and screaming to do. Well, you kind of were. And I'm going to show you that you love it, and that I love you and I delight in you. But yeah, hard, empty, throw a dart at any place on an emotion wheel and I could have been there. Yeah.
What I appreciate so much about your story as we are getting into it is that whether or not the women that are listening to this today deal with a chronic illness like you are dealing with right now, what every single woman on the field that I have interacted with can relate to is the feeling of there's so much need and I want to meet the needs. What can I do? How can I maximize this calling of going and walking out the door and filling our time with helping, serving, and very hard to step back and just, like you mentioned, hollow yourself out and ask the Lord, do I matter to you in the same way if I'm not meeting? And that identity piece that we sometimes find so much comfort in, of like, this is who I am. I've answered the call. I'm doing the hard things. And we find that that's what we've associated with. Because of that, I matter to God. But if we were to take all of that away, do I still matter to you? But we sometimes don't even give ourselves the space to listen for that answer, right? Because we filled it so much with the doing that we can't wrestle with that. We recently have actually entered onto this topic of wilderness with our community in several different ways. So it's fun to hear you also reiterating. I feel like the Lord must really want to meet women on the field with this, because where our Equip conference was titled had to do with the wilderness, our Unplugged retreat had to do with the wilderness. You are talking about there is so much for you in the wilderness. So if women are listening to this from the wilderness, it's not a punishment. It's a place where God has something for you there. And I see that so much in your story, but it doesn't mean that we didn't go kicking and screaming there and we didn't try to suggest other options for God that were exit ramps from the wilderness that might be a better place for us to serve. So Joy, what practices and rhythms are with you now to connect with the Lord that are different? How have you seen that changed in this unpredictable season for you?
Yeah, so many ways. And I think, right, if there's still tension, like BC Joy is still alive in me and well. So we play tug of war on these things often. I have a new understanding that I don't have to prove myself to God and to others in what I do every day. And yet I can wake up in the morning and go, what do I need to do today to bring worth and value? So the things that I say about tools or, what practices have been meaningful to me, I need to couch it and say that it might sound tidy and neat, but it's far from that. As you are talking about the Equip conference, I wish that I had had that session on lament. I wish that during my reentry period, I had had the reentry retreat or the 30 days of prompts to process grief. So if you're listening to this right now and you're connecting with, man, I have felt alone. I have felt like an outlier. I am in a wilderness. There is suffering going on, and maybe even invisible. It might not be seen by others, or even have language to put around it, to wrap around it. I would encourage you to listen to that session on lament as part of the Equip conference, and maybe find that PDF of 30 days of prompts to process and grieve. Sometimes the words, the verses that other people have prepared are so helpful. For me right now, I have found that spiritual direction has been such a gift and a tool. I began to receive it and then thought, this is something I really want to offer to the workers that I work with. And so I became certified, finished in 2024, got my training. And for me to begin each morning with that reminder of, I don't start by doing, I start by being with the Lord. I start by getting in His Word, and like this morning, Psalm 27, 13 and 14, that I believe I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. For someone like me who's in transition and likes to already have everything laid out and lined up and known, to be able to be reminded that I don't do for the Lord. His pacing, His timing is perfect. He knows what the future holds, and He will continue the good work that He has begun, and I can trust and rest in that.
That's just wisdom for any season of our life. Honestly, Joy, if the women who are listening can figure that out, whether there is a season of plenty or a season of wanting, that is what we all should be working toward clinging to, is that understanding. Thank you so much for that reminder. Joy, what goodness has the Lord had for you in this season?
Oh my goodness. Let me start with a quote by Scott Schaum, and I'll paraphrase it, but he says in his book, The Uninvited Companion, what if God is allowing this suffering to take you to a place where you would otherwise never go. And man, had I known back then all the rich gifts and gems that God would have for this, it would have made all of that waiting and questioning a lot easier. But God had to form a lot of other things in me before being able to have that long view to look back and see them. But, I think that God knew that He was going to give me a new ability to not only exit a purely logical place of meeting with Him, and not purely, but Lord, I'm going to get through this many verses and chapters today, and I'm doing this for you. And here's my prayer list, and I've got everyone on it who needs prayer, and I'm going to make it through that. But going, no, I can now sit and recognize here's places I'm uncomfortable with. Here's what isn't sitting well with me, which is why I'm not sitting well in relationships with others. And I'm going to allow you to take that to the potter's wheel and start to reform and reshape things. In the transition of not being able to practice full-time medicine, being short of breath, He brought me the role of member care and brought me kind mentors like Barney and many others who I say I was their Holy Spirit, lost lamb project. They saw this naive, didn't have member care for herself on the field, barely knew what it meant. And they were like, oh, Lord, you're pointing me here. She knows nothing. Great. Let me pour into her. So really beautiful, kind friendships and colleagues. But then also, we don't go on the field as singles expecting to get married. That's kind of a dream that I think it's different for everyone. But for me, it was put way up on a top shelf, possibly to die in a corner. And coming back to the US, I did not feel attractive or very dateable. And God, in His infinite humor, a few years into my return was like, oh yeah, you know what? That thing that you put way up there on the shelf, I have something beautiful to fill that with too. And so He brought me my husband, who we both have gotten married a little later in life. And I think both are so glad that we waited and had the Lord bring us each other. And also just, I think, a special gratitude for the long wait that it was. And now we have a home together versus missionary single-esque housing for so many years. There is a home that I can call mine, and I can choose what I want to be beautiful and to fill that space. And so there is a filling of things that I wasn't even able to dream of holding on the field. And in very unexpected, unsought after ways, He's like, oh, yeah, that branch that looked so empty and bare that everything had fallen off from, you thought it was just going to stay bare and that would be a place of acceptance. But no, I have buds and new flowers and new leaves that bring me glory and adorning you in a different way.
As you've been describing this whole season, I keep having this picture in my mind of the wilderness and buried treasure, and that, this idea of scraping with your fingers to uncover the goodness that is there. And it's painful and it's hard. And Lord, isn't there a better way? But that what is buried there was so rich and beautiful, and you could only get to it by the hardship of being there and doing what it took to uncover those things. And I would just, as we, look at, you mentioned this new season that you're in, you have a home, you have a husband, you have these member care skills, you have this perspective, you are open hands asking, Lord, what else might have been on a shelf that I had tucked away that you might dust off, uncover, and give me. But as you look back, even, to this place, are there any other parts of your story that just surprised you of God's goodness as you look for and anticipate the surprises that are to come?
I think it's easy to read, passages like Romans 5, and where it says, we rejoice in our sufferings. We know that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And go, yeah. Okay. Like, yes, I know this. I know that this is truth, but I identify so much with Job, who at the end of the book goes, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Like, I knew you in this hearing way, like I could hear about you, but now I know you. And I think there is something about hardship and suffering that it's really hard to know God and his character without really living in those places and not just surrendering, but receiving his invitation for more. It's like there's these hungers, these desperate hungers that start to emerge. And I think that's the fertile ground that God delights to be in. So I think for me, a gift that has been so surprising is this shift of when I think I'm entering suffering, like I see the road sign that's like suffering 5 miles ahead, or suddenly land in it. I would hope that I've become more curious and asking, Lord, like, what are you up to here? What lies ahead that you would allow this to happen? You would lead me here. And I think if you're listening to this and you're thinking of your own road signs or ones you have long passed, can you ask God, like, what does he want to speak tenderly over you, to comfort you with? Is there something he's asking you to pry your fingers off from? And not because he's just being mean about it, but what does he want to leave you with? Is there a new hunger, a new invitation, a new gift he wants to fill? Is this creating a place where there is a special companion he will bring you, one that can listen really well, to be truthful, to be loving in the midst of something that is hard? So I think that would be one aspect. The second thing I would highlight is there is a gift in having to redefine success. Success for, I can't speak for all medical missionaries, but for BC Joy was, I round on all my patients. I make sure they have a good care plan written, that they have the resources that they need, and that at the end of the day, regardless of the outcome, I have poured myself out to make sure they have everything that they need, which is really God. Like, that's God. That's not human. That's a mutation of identity. And really coming back in the fallout of all of that, to go, what is success? What truly is success? And Elizabeth Elliot, that I know has been highlighted here, she talked about success as obedience to God, not worldly or missionary achievements. And one thing that really spoke to me this past year, I was in the prophets this year, really taking a deep dive. And Jeremiah was such a comfort to me. And reading some of the commentaries, that from all evidence we have in scripture, he only had 2 converts. Like, 40 years of ministry, a difficult message no one wanted to hear, that he got persecuted for. We really only see maybe 2 people who were touched by that word in his lifetime. So if I went on the field, and I can't tell you that I did anything, that my beginning of this first term, long term with my org, I mega style fail and come off the field. I have no idea if I had an impact there. But I know that the Lord allowed each thing that happened to me, and that the gifts and the gems he has brought me in that mean that I am a joy who now truly has seen the Lord and seen his goodness in the land of the living. And Denise, I have to tell you, I want to be careful in saying this because haven't always been at this place in continuing to have a lot of health struggles, but right now, I would not want to be healed of what continues to wreck my body if it meant that I would lose all of these gems, these precious gifts that he has given to me. If it meant going back to BC Joy, I don't want it. And that's where I sit today.
Joy, thank you so much for this whole conversation. What I was hearing, an invitation as you were talking, was that when we go through something with the Lord, he's inviting us to learn about him and his character in different ways than we were before. And whether that is through really hard things or whether that is through a season of surprisingly good things, that there are things about his character that he invites us to be curious about in every season. And what a gift if we remain curious and not resistant to getting to know him better in each of those seasons. And I thank you so much for the encouragement that you give to us in our communities about someone who in the Bible has been so transformative and offers sometimes the verse that people have tattooed on their arms of a reminder of what the Lord has for them in his lifetime may have felt like, who am I even encouraging? Who's even listening to this? And I feel like that resonates so much. We're so grateful for the Lilias Trotters, the Elizabeth Elliots, the people that have left their stories for not only the impact it had in the time, but for the goodness it brings to those of us who get to hear it now. And I thank you for that, Joy, because of your story and what it's going to mean and does mean to those who will find it this month, who will go back through and find it in seasons. We've had women that have said, I was totally in a season when I couldn't get off of my couch. And so I just picked up the Velvet Ashes podcast and I hit play. And the stories of the women were the stories that sustained me, that the Lord used to help me feel like I had a shoulder to put my arm around when I couldn't get off of the couch. And so thank you so much, Joy. I so appreciate our time getting to visit with you today.
Thank you for allowing me to be here and for the encouragement that Velvet Ashes is. And may the Lord continue to use it to write the stories of all the women who listen and who know that the Lord does desire them not to be alone, but to be seen.
Amen. And with that, I hope you take that encouragement and the encouragement of this month's podcast, and it blesses and ministers to you. We'll see you next month on the Velvet Ashes Legacy Podcast.
Every voice part of the symphony, a hallowed polyphony, the messy middle mystery, the legacy of mercy.